Good evening. Today is March 10th. S&P 500 was trading pretty much the whole day around 3,900 level, and it was just another great day for the infrastructure. We closed up 33 points at 3906, and
It was a good day.
it
I
was
mean,
a good day, yes, but it was just in the
it,
range.
it crossed it crossed 3,900
As
certain
you have
people
predicted,
as
yes,
certain
again,
people
ahead of
suggested.
schedule.
That's okay.
Indeed.
But
And Nasdaq was mostly unchanged, and Dow Jones closed above the round 32,000 number for the first
mhm.
time ever. It seems to be the leader right now.
Mr. Bitcoin wasn't too bad.
Yes, Bitcoin was as high as 57, and even real gold was high, like around half of the percent.
That's right. Strange,
But House
strange.
has passed the COVID bill, so
Wow.
people
Yeah.
are excited. And most excited were the Wall Street bets bros today. I'm not sure if you've noticed the GME stock had GameStop stock had a totally wild day. It
What was it?
it tripped multiple surge breakers. At some point, it went down $100 in 5 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, it was as high as 350 and as low as 172.
Hmm.
It's again, it's in a wild roller coaster. And as funny as Zero Hedge said, if GME again doesn't sell stock now, it should be an eighth deadly sin.
It is rather crazy that they're not trying to
Right.
profit from this
Yeah, indeed.
as the other companies have.
Exactly. And bonds had another up day.
That was amazing. They started down a half and they gradually crept up. And as mentioned, it was a Baron Coleman day. Everything was up except my woodlaw. Go on. What else is happening?
Yeah, I think there is not much for today from me.
All right. Well, I promised that there was some unfinished business from yesterday. I promised that I would reveal some of the important proverbs of Tom Wiswell, who was world three move champion for 25 years in checkers and wrote 22 books and visited my office once a week for 25 years. And he'd always, we'd always put up a sign in my office, board meeting in progress. And Tom used to play with a lot of the boxers were very good checker players. Jack Dempsey and Gene Cunning were very good players. And Branch Rickey, who was the person who brought the Jackie Robinson into the major leagues, was someone he used to play with every week before I became his lifeblood. It was sort of sad. He lived alone in Bensonhurst. He had a million friends, which was very, very good. And he wrote thousands of problems. Most people don't realize that there are little setups on the board that can make you cry or laugh or can cause tremendous excitement or frustration. Anyway, I was I came across one of his proverbs that I think is very relevant today. He'd come in with about 50 proverbs that he wrote every week, and they were about the market and checkers and life. When I was friendly with the palindrome, he invited me to play a game of chess. I told him I'm no good in chess. I can't I don't know anything about it. And so I then took lessons from Art Bisguier, who had won the national junior champions, the national senior champions, the national open champions, had several wins against Reshevsky. And after about 10 years, Art Bisguier would join us. So we'd have Tom Wiswell and Art Bisguier and a gentleman named Jules Leopold, who was actually by far the smartest of the group. He had a very unusual business. In those days, I don't know if they had this in Russia, but the newspapers would award a prize if you solved the contest. And they'd make the contest very hard. And he would go around from city to city. And when the newspapers had a contest, he would solve them, and then he would sell the answers. And that was his business. And he was a great checker player, great man, very, very smart. Well, before we go into checker proverbs, people, there was some unfinished business. The market hit 3,900 several times yesterday, and then it failed. And I said, it will be back. And that reminded me of a story about Beethoven. Beethoven was obsessed with his nephew Carl. He called his mother the Queen of the Night. And as part of his brother's will, Beethoven was given sole custody of the son because the wife was too dissipated. But then he changed, about an hour before he died, the brother changed the will to say that no, they had to share the custody. But anyway, Beethoven spent the better part of 5 years of his life suing the wife and claiming that she stole his money. It turned out it was her money, but that she was out until 3 a.m. And then there's a very great movie called Beethoven's Nephew, which is by far the best movie about a composer. And one of his adorable conquests asked him, why is Carl so important to you? He said, without Carl, I have nothing. She said, nothing? He said, yes. Then there's a picture of the Ninth Symphony where he couldn't conduct because he couldn't hear, but he was always 4 or 5 measures off the beat. But when the audience heard it and it was finished, they gave him a tremendous ovation, and it continued for 5 or 10 minutes. And Schindler, who was his amanuensis, said, Maestro, they're clapping for you, they want you. And he said, no, I have to see that Carl doesn't go out. In any case, getting back to the story, so Beethoven told the court in Vienna that, unless you give me sole custody of Carl, I'll have to go to Bonn. Well, they didn't like that at all. But they came up with something fair. They said, you'll have to, you'll have to bring him to secondary school. So he brought him to secondary school. By that time, he was very famous. He'd been eclipsed in about 1910, but he wrote the Wellington Overture, which strangely was the most popular thing he ever wrote. And he made a lot of money from it. Anyway, the headmaster said, "Maestro, I hope you'll be back again." And they go, "Yes, I'll be back. I'll be back." And then the next day, he had taken up lodgings 1 block away from the secondary school, and he mounted a telescope, which he used to observe his son, Carl, which was his nephew. They called Carl the man who killed Beethoven. Yeah, there's a person there's a certain person who I say the man who killed my libertarian group. I had a group for 40 years that every month on the first Thursday I'd run, and I had about 100 regular people who came to it. And I had a man who killed it. He was former book editor of Barron's. I won't mention his name. It causes me too much grief anyway. So, so the same way Beethoven would be back, the market was back to 2,900. As part of this crazy stimulus bill of $2 trillion, if you were a man of color and a farmer, without proof, they will absolve you from 120% of any loan that you had. And if you work for the post office or the government, you get 15 weeks of paid leave if your child is remote learning. You might have to stay home with him, and so you need 15 weeks of paid leave. But I found if you're a restaurant, you can get back $5 million. The people who drafted the bill don't know the difference between sales and profits, but like if your sales were $5 million less in 2020 than 2019, then you get the full 5 million that you lost in sales. And there's a movie which I put on Twitter and called Harrison Bergerac.
The year was 2081, and everyone was finally equal. They were only equal before God and the law, you see. They were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was quicker than anybody else. And all this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of the United States Handicapper General. The strong wore weights to make them weaker. The intelligent wore earpieces that kept them from taking unfair advantage of their brain.
Okay, all right. Well, I think everybody gets the idea. Eventually, of course, they do.
It's amazing. I can't believe I missed that. That's too funny.
Of course, it's not funny. It's
well, it's both fun. It's ironic, funny, sad. Yes.
It's tragic. Anyway, at all performances, of course, everybody had to wear masks. See, I mean, the president is wearing a double mask now to make people feel low.
And he's been vaccinated as well, so.
Well, the denouement of the story is sort of like Atlas Shrugged. One of the ballet dancers takes off a mask and starts dancing without a handicap. Of course, then the handicap general comes and they shoot him or bring him back to jail. Okay, anyway, this is what Tom Westwell has. He said, some are destroyed by defeat, and some are made small and mean by victory. The greatness lives in one who triumphs equally over defeat and victory. So here, some are destroyed by defeat. That's the former president. And some are made small and mean by victory. That's the current president. I thought that was particularly relevant now. So again, we'd have games of checkers and chess between Bisguyer and myself. I wish I had. Here are some of the proverbs that Tom had that I think are particularly relevant to the market. It says, drawing is not a dirty word, and neither is defeat. Play to win, but take a draw, even a defeat, and wait for another day. That's the name of the game. In the market, you have to be careful not to let it all hang out. You got to make sure they can. As my mentor Irving Riddell used to say, the market will always be there. So don't take too much risk. Don't cry too much about a defeat. And if you have to get out even, do so.
Do you think that everybody talks now about the concept of mental capital? Do you think that's what we're talking about?
Mental capital. Well, what's in your mind is very important. Your knowledge is very key. All the checker players have had, in the old days, had what they called manuscripts. They had loose leaf books of 500 pages with all conceivable games. If you want to be certain of your position, you must begin by doubting it. Be careful. Don't go out on a limb. In order to win, you must have plenty of confidence. And that's fine, unless it becomes conceit. Checker students are lucky they don't know how much they don't know. Sometimes if you knew what the day was going to be like, you wouldn't trade at all. But then you found that you did trade, and if you knew what the market was going to be like in March of 2020, you probably wouldn't have held a position at all. A good player sees the handwriting on the wall before there is any handwriting on the wall. So try to plan and have foresight. Don't make your trades until you've planned out why you're making them. Whenever we lose a game and want to see who is responsible, we just look in the mirror. And that's so true, almost all the bad things that we do. Always look as far ahead as you can, and then look one more move. That's when you make a trade. In other words, I think one of the worst mistakes that the average trader makes is to try to take out 2-3 points from the market. When you look at it, the VIG on that is probably about 50 points, the bid ask plus the commissions. By the way, why is the Chicago Merc trading at 220? Because they charge a fee on every transaction, which is very profitable to them and gives them tremendous profits. But it's the vig that the ordinary person plays, and when you're a member, you don't have to pay that vig, and that's the reason that memberships traded for hundreds of thousands of dollars on the oil exchange and Chicago Board of Trade. Everybody who was a member became very rich, worth hundreds of millions if they kept their seats. I used to have 2 seats on every exchange. Well, as I say, I have about 20,000 of these proverbs. Each one is better than the next. As Tom would say, well, I've lived my day. I have a lot of friends, and now I'll take off my hat and call it a day. And he went on until he was about 80 years old. And then one day he was coming up the elevator to our offices on 59th Street. He said, Victor, I couldn't remember what floor you were on. And then his deterioration began. Strangely, some of the checker players are able to keep it going. There's one checker player who won the national tournament when he was 19. His name was Asa Long, and he also won it when he was 90 years old. So a good checker player can maintain the logic and the profundity of the game for a long time. Let's see, do I have anything? Oh yeah, the adding insult to injury. That was amazing. At the last moment, Chuck Schumer added to the $2 trillion stimulus bill that any state that received money would not be able to reduce taxes.
Wow.
So he wanted to take away all power that the states have given to the federal government and make sure that they used all their money to pay off the unions. Anyway, with all this going on, granted it's very woke, and that's why the market went up so much this year, but a lot of that is very spiteful, as Tom said. You know, when you're a bad loser. I have a tweet on Roger Clemens and sort of throwing his bat at someone after beating him. It's rather loathsome, but of course you have to consider making money. As someone wrote back to me when you have to be more woke if you want to unlock the market, want to be profitable in the market. Of course, the technology companies are all on board with the woke, and in the past, the more woke it was, the better NASDAQ did compared to the S&P. But this year, the S&P is up 5% and the NASDAQ's basically unchanged. Yeah, the little change in habitat, the grains were all way down today. Soybeans was down 30 cents. That market can really move. And bonds were up, and gold was up. So we had an unusual constellation events today. All right, well, I don't have much today, so
Do you have any prediction for tomorrow? We're so used to, your
well, I was
predictions.
wrong. I was wrong in the middle of last week, but I got redeemed by the beginning and the end. After a up day like this, I don't like to just barrel in on the long side. I think it will had a strong close. Anyone's game tomorrow. Something. Follow all the proverbs of Wiswell and be careful.
Sounds
All right. Thank you very much.